Your daughter goes missing after heading to the fair. Her body will be found and your ex-girlfriend will end up being convicted of the crime. But 4 years later, when another teenager goes missing, a cigarette butt found near her will match the same DNA found on your daughter's crime scene. The police never had the right person behind bars, but will they accept their mistake and will they get it right this time? Let's address a couple of things immediately. Was that Kentucky brew? Was that KFC coffee behind me? Yes, surprisingly really great coffee. I always raved about KFC coffee, well, always, since quarantine, since I actually tried it, because, you know, I'm the independent coffee shop slut, and it's very similar, if you're familiar with blends in London, to Clemson and Sons blend, or like Perky Blenders. It has that like sweetish, milky taste. It's not like too sour, it's not too bitter, like a lot of blends can be. So hey, go get KFC coffee if you don't have any like independent coffee shops. And that's that for breeding for the day. And well, the coffee is here literally as the lifesaver, as you could probably guess from the intro, and are wondering who hurt me, who took away my voice. I don't know. Listen, I have no idea. I didn't have voice for like a few days. It was something else, I guess. Also, like a nice break for my husband. He didn't complain for a couple of days, so hey, maybe I'm gonna just text him right now as I'm recording. We need to talk, make him stress for no reason. Scorpio vibes. So now that is addressed and you hopefully can handle my flipping voice during this whole recording, well, let's get into the case, because Maja is the name, and I wanted to fight every single person in this case is the freaking game, except from the victims and their families. Literally, everybody else needed some reality check, like some punching in the face in this freaking story, because boy, this pissed me off. So it came out on Netflix. I think it's called Murder by the Sea or something like that. I don't know. They always give it these ambiguous fucking names that are not even clickbait. Remember when like they thought that I would watch something that is called Seaspiracy instead of Conspiracy? It was right there, and I was like, no, I will not watch it. I don't care. I care about the environment, but I will not watch it out of principle because you fucked up at a really basic thing. Okay, so it came out on Netflix on like Friday, right? And it is about a true crime case from Spain. And I didn't know zilch, and it takes everything in me not to Google everything beforehand and spoil everything for myself. This is one of the main reasons why I don't do parters, even though some of the videos are too long. I can't just split it in like different parts, because I know that I can't resist the urges of Googling things before like watching a video, so I'm like, I don't want to put people through that myself. Anyways, so hey, I resisted everything once I actually watched the trailer like a week before this came out, and I was like, this looks interesting. I immediately asked like my Spanish friends, like, oh, are you aware, because this was like end of 90s, you know, beginning of 2000s, and every like Spanish person that I asked was like, no, this was big. Like, this was big when we were kids. And I was like, I have no idea what this case, what the fuck. So I watched it, and from the get-go, from about 10-15 minutes in, I was already pissed off. I already started raging. I was like, I need to cover this for the channel from like the true crime perspective, because the documentary does a really good job of portraying it from the media, the phobia that is heavily present in this case, from those angles. And I understand why, because obviously it is a documentary, they need the visuals, and the media provided those visuals for them, so that is the angle they're gonna take, and then include like family interviews. Obviously I'm going to do it as if it was like any true crime case that I cover on the channel, and let's just say there is a lot of information that the documentary doesn't tell you. And also the angle, if any, that I am taking is the consequences of miscarriages of justice. And if this case serves to highlight a single thing in 2021, it is exactly how dangerous it is to put the wrong person behind bars. Which brings us to This Week Is Gone Bad, the series where I cover ordinary people who have decided to switch their life up and to turn to crime. And this week's features Tony Alexander King, better known as the Holloway Strangler. The beginning of an end for Tony Alexander King really began on October the 9th, 1999, when Rocio Wanninkhof was supposed to meet some friends at a fair, but she never showed up. Almost a month after her disappearance, on November the 2nd, the police will find her body, and among the evidence there will be a cigarette butt on the scene. Then, almost 4 years later, in August 2003, 17-year-old Wanninkhof-Carabantes will disappear from outside her house in similar circumstances. The scene where her body will be found a week after will also contain one crucial cigarette butt. This second DNA profile matched that of the profile collected in Rocio's case, and the police will finally have a name. But, of course, it won't be the name of the person that they have already wrongfully imprisoned. So let's go back into the timeline, understand a bit about Rocio's and Sonia's lives, the wrongful conviction, and how the police finally managed to track the right person down. Rocio Wanninkhof-Ornos was born on the 9th of November 1979. Her dad was Dutch, hence the Wanninkhof in the last name, and her mom was Spanish. Her parents, Alicia and William, had 2 other children, a son and a daughter named Rose. And at the time of the events we are talking about today, the family lived in Mijas, Costa del Sol. Well, I say the family, but the family structure changed up a bit. William wasn't really part of the family any longer. When Rocio was only 3 years old, so in 1982, her mother Alicia actually started having an affair with one of her friends. The friend's name is Maria Dolores Vasquez, but for the purpose of, well, that being a long name and this whole story not lasting like 3 hours, and because of how she was generally known in public, we are gonna, from this point on, call her Lolly, because that's how everybody called her. This affair soon turned into something more serious between Alicia and Lolly, and William kind of, well, left the picture. Alicia left him pretty soon after that, and she moved in with Lolly and started raising her 3 children with her. And for quite a while, they were a happy family unit. The kids would go to school, and when in class they ask you to write a small essay about your parents, they would write about their 2 mothers. And even in their personal diaries that the police got hold of later, Rocio and her siblings would only write the positive things about Lolly. But there was always one issue prevailing throughout the years in Alicia's and Lolly's relationship, and that was always who owned the house, who did it legally belong to. And it seemed like the 2 of them could never be on the same page, and this is said to be what actually broke this relationship off completely. This eventually led to the 2 of them separating, and at this point Rocio was already 14 and 15 years of age, so she understood the situation, Alicia and Lolly broke off on amicable terms and life just moves on. Couple of years later, Alicia actually introduces a man to their children's lives. She starts dating a guy again. And Lolly really did not like this, to the point that she actually started sending Alicia threats. Just 2 to 3 months before Rocio's disappearance, Alicia started getting these messages from Lolly about them getting back together, and once she responded to her no, this breakup is final, and I will always be there for you as a friend, but nothing else, the romantic part of it is over. Well, Lolly told her that she's going to be crying bloody tears and that she's going to hit her where it hurts her the most. And to think that I started studying modern languages, like I would suck as a translator. This is, by the way, my translation of Spanish, so it is as literal as it will get, but still, I guess a bit better than Google Translate. I would have sucked at this profession. It is what it is. The important part is the hurting her where it hurts the most. And now in the timeline, we get to the night of Rocio's disappearance. During the afternoon of 9th of October 1999, Rocio leaves her home around 5:30 p.m. and she tells her mom she's gonna go to her boyfriend's house, and then she plans to return home, possibly to change, or just go straight to the fair. So that is her plan for the night, and then she'll be back to, like, obviously sleep after going to the fair. This is all, by the way, taking place in Malaga, in the south of Spain. So the boyfriend, everybody lives close by. This fair is literally down the road, and the boyfriend lives about half a kilometer from her. So of course this is the trip that she has done plenty of times, and her mom doesn't have to worry about it. Around 9:30 p.m. Rocio then leaves her boyfriend's house, and she tells him that she's gonna go home, change clothes, and then meet him at the fair. Now, as I mentioned, this is half a kilometer of a walk, so it would have taken her a couple of minutes to reach home. But if you remember, her mom wouldn't have been suspect of anything because she could have just gone straight to the fair. And when the boyfriend doesn't actually meet up with Rocio in the fair, he isn't immediately alerted because he thinks, okay, maybe she stayed at home, she decided not to come and she's gonna call me in the morning, or maybe she's with another group of friends at this fair, maybe she actually decided to sleep over at somebody's house. This wasn't anything super alarming at that moment. It was only the next morning when Alicia opened the door and realized that Rocio never slept home that she started raising alarms. Alicia, the mom, immediately rings the boyfriend, starts grilling him. Like, where is my daughter? She was last seen with you. And he tells her, like, yeah, she left my house at 9:30, I didn't see her since, I thought she must be sleeping over at somebody's house. So Alicia is calling all of the friends, realizes that Rocio has not slept at anybody's place, and she calls the civil guard, which is the police in Spain, and immediately organizes the search with the neighborhood to start just like covering the area. Alicia and over 1,000 volunteers are involved in this search now, and it doesn't take them long to find a clue: Rocio's shoes. Just from how the shoes were found, it indicated to the police that as Rocio was walking home, somebody just attacked her in the middle of the nowhere and then started dragging her, so her shoes kind of fell off, and he stabbed her on the scene because there was a large pool of blood, but then dragged her into the trunk of a car and then drove off. Because they could deduce that just by looking at the drag marks where the body would have been dragged and then the tire marks of the car. Another interesting deduction the police made from the get-go and has never changed their mind on this area where Rocio was dragged from was apparently like inclined terrain. So it would be hard to drag her body upwards, basically. So they immediately deduced, okay, this is a two people job at least. So from the get-go, they're suspecting multiple people, not just one person. During the next few weeks, the searches are conducted, the parents are giving statements to the public, like if anybody has her, not to hurt her, to return her. And it's very visible, something that nobody really mentions, is how unusual crimes of this sort are in Europe. Like, people aren't used to make these statements, because I cover a lot of American cases or just like British cases, and especially in the US, it's as if people have like rehearsed. Just because of the amount of true crime content that we consume, it's as if we have rehearsed in our head what we would say if somebody, like a family member or a loved one, was to disappear. But from this footage from 1999, it's really evident how unusual this is for Spain, for Malaga at that time and the age, that the parents are sort of like confused as to even what they would say. And that is just one extra reason why the media is there, and they're heavily present. And one face that keeps popping up because she's involved in all of the searches and she's always there near Alicia, helping her out emotionally, is her ex-lover, Lolly. Then on the 2nd of November, so almost a month after her disappearance, a couple of people that were attending this sporting club, Los Altos del Rodeo, near Marbella, so technically the next big town. There's a couple of like small cities in between, but Marbella is a lot further away than these searches ever covered and where they actually thought they might locate Rocio. Her body has been found 30 miles from the location where she was attacked. Now, what was visible was that whoever dragged her there semi-attempted to hide parts of her body. So she was kind of half hidden in leaves, half hidden in bushes, and at this stage her body was in some serious stages of decomposition due to the bugs that were also in that area. But also the perpetrator clearly tried to cover her with garbage bags and sort of really obstruct her from being found. The really sad part of this story is that Rocio was really decomposed. They couldn't really even identify her just from her looks. So her sister Rose only identified her from the jewelry that she was wearing and from the t-shirt that wasn't even on her because Rocio was actually found nude. But the t-shirt was kind of in her vicinity with slash marks inside. So they suspected that it was removed of her after she was killed. It would be the position her body was found in that the police is going to base the next theory on. What's important to know is that the police will discard sexual assault. Well, the autopsy technicians will after they examine the body. Plain English, it means there was no semen on Rocio. But her body was, from what I've seen, I'm not sure how this looked like in stages of decomposition, but apparently she was positioned with her legs spread open. From one reenactment that I have seen from this really good video that I have actually watched that wasn't even the Netflix one, it seemed as if her legs were positioned in a way that you would position them once you're to do like crunches, sit-ups, whatever you call them. So it's kind of like bent at the knees. That's what I am saying. Like, I don't know in rigor mortis. I'm not sure in rigor mortis like how that would look like post-mortem. So I don't know if that is correct, but the premise is that she was posed in such a way that might indicate staged sexual assault. So there was no semen on the body, rather she was just staged so that it looked like somebody attempted sexual assault. And in police's mind, the theory immediately started forming, what if this is the works of a woman? Now, before I start losing it over that theory, let me tell you what they reconstructed, like what they think happened to Rocio on that night. So they're thinking, Rocio is on her way home. A car pulls up next to her, somebody just gets out of the car and conducts this blitz attack. They stab her first in the neck, slitting her throat, but she is still alive. The next stab goes into her abdomen, but she is still fighting for her life and trying to flee. And she runs towards that direction where they found the pool of blood and where they will find her shoes. But the attacker is obviously faster because they're not the ones that have been stabbed. So they push her onto the ground and then stab her 8 more times in the back, hence the large pool of blood. And obviously the autopsy confirms the amount of stabs to the back. These stabs were said in this documentary to have decapacitated her because they stabbed her back, so she definitely wouldn't have been able to even fight any longer. And obviously then they stabbed like the vital organs, so she would have probably died during this stabbing. This is when they drag her, but she leaves her shoes behind as she's being dragged, and it's like an incline. They put her into the trunk and then transport her to this secondary location where they leave her in this position that to the police indicated hatred and revenge as possible motives. Actually, I missed out on 2 important things that happened at the scene of the attack. The police speculated that as he dragged Rocio, all bloody, most probably dead, into the trunk, that at some point they offered her a tissue. Or they used the tissue because she was too bloody to wipe the blood off her, because the tissue was found at the scene of the attack. And also after they put her in the trunk and shut that trunk, well then to calm themselves down, they light up a cigarette, they smoke it in full, and then they just drop the cigarette butt on the scene of the attack, and then they drive off. Once they analyzed this cigarette butt in the lab, and this is so fascinating, they literally showed it in this second documentary that I watched of the case. They kind of break it down, they cut all of the parts apart. They remove the rolls, so the outer part, and then they pull all the DNA out of it and then put it into some liquid that amplifies it. And the technology at the time, the best that it could do was to show them that it's male's DNA. But once they put it into the system to see if it will match any previous offenders, it didn't pick up on anybody. It didn't match anybody in the system. But the importance here is that this is male's DNA. A few days after Rocio's attack, a cab driver is going to come into the police saying that they have heard a scream, and they believe that just before hearing that scream, that they have actually witnessed a car pass them by, and they gave the physical description of the man, to the point that police actually had a police sketch, but unfortunately nothing will come out of this police sketch. And the fact that this was definitely a male that this taxi driver witnessed would also mean nothing to the police. This is where I'm gonna go off on a tangent for a minute, because this is when I started losing it during that documentary, because you just told me this is male's DNA, and then you gave me 10 theories that just completely contradict that, and I was just like, I'm not following. I am not, if this was to happen today, or just in a location where crime happened more often, I definitely don't think any of these conclusions would have been made. The only reasonings they have behind this perpetrator being a woman was the lack of semen, the apparent staged positioning, and the fact that the motives were hatred and revenge. It was definitely personal. But then that is contradicted by that male DNA. But then they're saying, what if it was multiple people? IMO moment, in my personal, very personal opinion, but also just from research of many true crime cases, I have a feeling today if somebody was to look at the same crime scene, they would see the amount of violence, and they wouldn't first of all attribute it to usual MO or a woman. But I also have a feeling today a police officer would see the garbage bags over a young woman and be like, hey, this is somebody who has beef with young women as a general. The perpetrator hates women. Let's maybe not put the blame on somebody who is openly a lesbian, because by default she doesn't hate women, but okay. And then the lack of semen, I have a feeling we would attribute to either somebody being impotent or somebody maybe getting off on different things. Maybe they are not there to leave the semen because they know that this is how they will get caught, and they want this to look as a staged crime scene because it will draw the police attention away from them. But no, they don't see any of this. And this is when they lost me, the documentary. I was like, wait, what are these conclusions? Because as I told you, I had no idea where this case was going. I was like, this is all wrong. I was just sitting there being like, I will not like the ending of this because this does not seem right, to tell you that. So what happens next is kind of logical. They start interviewing and grilling her boyfriend, and justifiably so. He didn't have a really strong alibi, did he? She apparently left his home to go home to switch the clothes and then meet him at a fair. And then people did see him at a fair, but there was a substantial amount of time that people couldn't account for her boyfriend. And they actually interviewed him 6 times, took his DNA, all of the usual. But one thing that they knew was her boyfriend at the time didn't have driver's license and couldn't drive. And if they had one thing for certain in this crime was that whoever was responsible for it was a driver, and also probably not a shitty one because they never had a criminal record. enough for them to be on the system, for somebody to match their DNA to them. Almost a year passes by, the case is still open, but the police has nothing to show for it. And as you know well, if you hear the term police has nothing to show for it, police has no suspect, and the media is putting the pressure, you know that those combos mean that shit is gonna hit the fan. Because the combo of media having the pressure on the police and the police not having a suspect means that they are going to make a suspect appear out of nowhere, out of thin air. The suspect is suddenly going to idealize themselves in front of their eyes, and then we are going to have a scapegoat. We are going to have somebody to blame for this crime. And who better to blame but the person that would have the motive that threatened the mother of Rocio, Alicia, just a few months before this attack, and that also inserted themselves into the investigation. They were there, they were helping the mother, they were conducting the searches and volunteering to search for her body. Lolly knew that the police intensively suddenly started looking at her because they were checking like which cigarette brand she was smoking, they were checking which car she was driving and comparing like the tire samples on both, and finally they asked her to search her house for clothes in order to technically do like a sample comparison. So there were some fibers found on Rocio's body. What the science at the time allowed for was you would technically put like something like a sellotape, okay? You would put like literally a tape against somebody's cloth and then like untape it, and then the fibers would be stuck to that tape part. You would put it through a machine, and then if under a microscope the fiber from the crime scene perfectly matches sort of like the bottom end of that fiber from somebody's cloth, that means that the person's clothes were at some point near or directly on Rocio, on the victim here. But that didn't work either. They had nothing to show for it, no forensic evidence linking her to it. But still, with the media pressure and with her already being named as a suspect on like all of the front pages, only days after they heavily started investigating and only focusing on Lolly as a suspect, she was already arrested. As they're putting pressure on Lolly inside the interrogation room, outside opinions are already forming and witnesses started coming forward. Lolly's account of events will always remain the same. Even after days of interrogation, they never broke her, she never confessed to any of it, because, spoiler alert, she never fucking did it. But her alibi was basically that she was at home during the whole of the evening, except one time when she went out to this restaurant called Oasis that is like 7 meters from her apartment, which is like literally next door. She just went to buy cigarettes and also to throw the garbage out. And she was at home the whole evening because she was taking care of her mother. Her mother was ill, and also of her 2-year-old niece. They have about 2 phone calls of hers, one lasting for about 30 minutes, starting at 10:34 p.m., and then the second one at 11:17 that lasted only 2 minutes. At the first glance, not the best alibi, not the most solid alibi, you know, taking care of your elderly mother who is also ill, who you can basically leave the house as soon as she falls asleep. Also, the 2-year-old niece probably really can't communicate and confirm this to the police. And the phone calls, yes, confirmed that partially during that evening she was at home making those calls, but still, before and after she could have been leaving the house without anybody knowing. But the police knew that they had to utilize the witnesses and that they had to hit the emotions of the public in order to compensate for the lack of the evidence. So the witnesses started coming forward. First of all, Alicia and other people corroborated the fact that she threatened her, that she's gonna hurt her where it hurts her the most. And then there was also a witness that stated that Lolly, as people would be putting around Rocio's missing posters, Lolly would be going around the neighborhood stabbing through them. This offered a crystal clear motive in people's minds. Alicia and Lolly were dating. Alicia broke it off. Lolly was pissed. She was apparently fuming for 4 years before doing anything, but okay, she was fuming. She was just sitting on her ass, seething and plotting. And then one night she snapped. She threatened Alicia. Alicia didn't fall for it, didn't want to return to her. So what Lolly did was to take revenge and kill her daughter. For this next bit, I need you to sit in the craziness with me, because this is the sequence of events that they are going to present in Lolly's trial. This is what they're going for, the prosecution, okay? This is it. Of course, there's no forensic evidence, right? She didn't have a car to her name at that point either. So, this is how it happened, guys. Let's just sit in the crazy, because Netflix doesn't make me sit in the crazy, so I have to make us all do it, all together. Lolly is dating Alicia for 11 years. She's helping her raise this family, these children are growing up, but the two of them have constant contentions over who is the legal owner of the house. So finally, the two of them separate. 4 years pass by and Alicia is just sitting and seething and planning how to take revenge. One last time, she gets in touch with Alicia to ask her to take her back. Alicia rejects her, tells her she's dating somebody else. So finally, Lolly has had her final blow. And on that evening, when she is apparently taking care of her mother and her niece, she decides, no, fuck it. Around 10 p.m., she gets out of the house, she encounters Rocio going home from her boyfriend's place, and this is when she decides to attack her. She apparently also had a knife in this situation. Yeah, I didn't tell you. She gets out of the house with a knife constantly. This is how Lolly lives her life. So she attacks Rocio then and there, and then just drags her from people's vision and sort of leaves her there, and then she's gonna take care of her body later. This kind of defies the first theory that the body was in the trunk and wasn't just bleeding out in that same area, but hey, this is what they're thinking, okay? So then, it's 11:30 and Lolly is at the window of the oasis, like 7 meters from her house. She doesn't have any blood on her, no. She just looks nervous, but that means that she has just committed a crime. So this is where she buys ciggies. This is a restaurant and also a shop. I don't understand it. I think of it as a drive-thru. It doesn't matter. This is when they witness her buying ciggies. And if you remember, this also means that she's not directly going to buy cigarettes, but she went home to sort of like check in with the niece and the mom and to make those 2 phone calls, who also nobody knows what they were about, nobody questioned that or like asked somebody, interrogated people on that. Cool. She makes those 2 phone calls and then is all like nervous, going to buy tobacco. She buys it, and after that, this is the part that got me. So after that, okay, she's chilling right upstairs, yeah, cool. The niece and the mom fall asleep. A lot of foreigners lived in that area, and you see in the early 2000s and late 90s, these foreigners would leave the keys in the ignition of their cars. So Lolly would have taken anybody's car. We know it's a specific car, we can't track the car to that area, but Lolly is like a fucking perp. Like, she has no smarter business to be doing. At around 2 in the morning, they know exact times somehow, she leaves this house apparently, and she's like a fucking creep, like peeping into people's windows, looking for which car has the keys in the ignition for her to jump into it, go back to where she disposed and left her seal to bleed, pick her, put her into the trunk, and then dispose of her in freaking Marbella, and then come here by the morning and pretend like everything is okay. And she did it all by herself, even though we suspect and know that there was a male's DNA, and suspect that there was 2 people as well, at least, involved. Do you hear the crazy? Because nobody in this story heard the crazy. I just do not understand. Like, as I was reading this, I was like, is everybody okay? Were we all like just mentally a bit challenged in like the early 2000s, like, to buy this story? The fuck? What added fuel to the fire during this trial was, of course, her character. They managed to portray Lolly as this calculating, aggressive, spiteful ex. But one thing that this documentary does really well was really drive that lesbophobia that was happening at that time within that region. And how, even with the lack of evidence, she was just the perfect scapegoat. And what this allowed for was that simply based on there not being clear sign of sexual assault, they would set aside the male DNA and just go off on the motive that they have introduced. Despite of the lack of forensic evidence and just based on her character, she was convicted of the killing in 2001, and she began serving her 15-year sentence. As Lolly is sitting in prison for over a year now, another girl goes missing. In August 2003, 17-year-old Wanninkhof-Carabantes went missing after leaving home to go meet with friends. The next day, as her mom opens the door and realizes she never came home, she leaves the house, and here, just a couple of meters away from the house, she sees a lot of blood on the floor, like on the pavement, and also against the car that is parked up there. So she knows that the struggle ensued. They call the civil guard and analyze the blood to confirm eventually that it is Sonia's. Even without waiting for that blood analysis, they also found one of her shoes right there next to the car, as well as her bag and her phone, so they knew that something definitely happened, literally right next to her house. And here it won't take long. It will take only 5 days until the searchers will find her 8 kilometers away from her house. There was also body concealment on this scene, and here he covered her naked body under some rocks. And this is so devastating, but her dad was one of the people on that search party that day when they found her body, and he was the one who was also removing the rocks in an attempt to identify her. I just can't imagine, because that's like only 5 days. The body is not even in that deep into decomposition, which just means that like you don't even need the autopsy to confirm how badly she has been attacked. Because one thing that Netflix does not tell you was just how gruesome this attack was. Just like in Rocio's case, let's go through the reconstruction of events. So they suspect like Sonia left the house and she was just literally walking past this tree that was close to her house when the attacker jumps out of their hiding spot and grabs her. And just because most of the bruises concentrated in like the face and head area, they knew that he was slamming and striking her head and face all the way up until she was semi-conscious, and then he put her into the trunk of the car. Here also, because this wasn't so much as a blitz attack like in Rocio's case, Sonia struck back. Sonia was scratching, Sonia was fighting right back, so she got some of their DNA under her nails. Once he drives her in the trunk for 17 kilometers, presumably she's still alive at this point, he stops the car in this isolated spot, gets out, takes her out of the trunk, puts her onto the back seat, and here, the way that everybody described this, and this isn't to do with translation, this is just purely weird. The way that this person would get sexual gratification was by grabbing certain areas of Sonia's while also punching her, to the point that she sustained 40 severe injuries and her jaw was even broken. And after he's done with this groping, punching, disgusting situation, he takes her shirt off again in this case, but here he takes the shirt off to make sure he finishes off the job and to strangle her with her shirt. So strangulation is here the cause of death. He hides Sonia's body under the rocks in order to put some time between the police actually finding the body and him fleeing the scene. He again smokes one last cigarette, drops the cigarette butt on the floor, and drives away. And as he's driving, he's throwing her t-shirt that he used to strangle her outside of the window, and then the trousers, and then the rest of the clothes he throws in the rubbish on the way to his house. As the police is on this scene and as they're analyzing DNA, again from the cigarette butt, they're analyzing the tires, they're gathering witness statements. Witnesses all stated that they have seen a white Toyota, like a white car. Everybody pretty much described the same car. Well, one person named Cecilia King is viewing the reports of Sonia's disappearance and then now murder, and she's looking at these news updates and something just doesn't sit right with her. Cecilia rings the police and she tells them, listen, like this is gonna sound crazy, but I was married to this guy, his name is Tony King, and when 4 years ago Rocio disappeared, he was out that night at that exact time, and as he returned home, he sort of just passed me by. I couldn't even see him, like what he was wearing, what he looked like. He just passed me by with some like manic energy, went into the toilet and then changed clothes completely and sort of scrubbed the ones that he was wearing, cleaned all of it, and then cleaned the whole toilet. Like once I entered the toilet later, it was spotless clean. So of course, I thought I was crazy at the time. I just had this gut feeling that maybe he might be responsible for it, but like I couldn't have gone to the police being like, hey, my husband cleaned the toilet. I would have been like, where is the crime, woman? Like, are you bragging? What the hell? But now, as I'm watching the news, I'm again noticing you're mentioning the same car. Tony used to drive that car, like I don't know what he drives now because we've been divorced actually for quite some time ever since that event happened and I left with our child. And he also used to smoke Royal Crown, which as I understand is like the cigarettes that have been found on both crime scenes. So if you could just maybe look into Tony, because my gut feeling is telling me that he is guilty. Let's speak about Tony for a brief second here. What do we know about the guy? Who was Tony King, Cecilia's ex-husband? Well, he was actually born Tony Bromwich in 1967 in Holloway, London, UK. The only things we know about his childhood is that from a young age he would report his older brother physically abusing him. This was followed by Tony being sentenced at the age of 19 in 1986 for 10 years for strangulations that wouldn't end up in death and sexual abuse of 5 women around Holloway area. During one of these attacks, he would throw a woman onto a pavement that resulted in the fractures of her nose and jaw. So very familiar patterns that are starting to form. And personally, when I was reading this, I wish that we knew more about his childhood, because to me it sounds like definite hatred towards women from the get-go. If you remember from when I first heard about Rocio's crime scene and how that was found, immediately that struck me as somebody who would have some vendetta against women. And usually that kind of hatred is formed either because of the hatred you would have towards your own mom, and here that could be because the mom wouldn't protect him against like his brother's abuse, or it strikes once somebody starts dating and then that woman might not be happy with the fact that Tony was impotent and then would make fun of him, which would obviously leave lasting impression on him, and he would start seeing all of the women as somebody who will make fun of him, hence he had to attack and kill them. This is just speculation, just literally like basic psychology based off nothing, just because we don't have much information. But for me personally, these would be sort of the most viable reasons as to why he would start doing something like this, and as we are gonna learn soon, he was impotent, so I'm not pulling that one out of my ass. That is why he attacked Rocio and Sonia in the way that he did. After these attacks of strangulation that happened around Holloway, the media dubbed him the Holloway Strangler. And when he was 19, he was sent to prison in 1986, but he only served 5 years and got out in 91. The judge in this trial stated that he was a monster who attacked these women because of his sexual inadequacies. He only served half of his sentence and was released in 91 because apparently while serving in prison he was submitted to therapy and was said to have been recovered. But that will be proven wrong because 6 months after his release he was behind bars because he attacked another woman. This time, though, he was caught robbing a woman at gunpoint and he will be sent to other 5 years in prison. In 1996, he gets out of prison again, and this is when he meets Cecilia Pantoja, the one that eventually will end up going to the police. So he meets her in London, he starts dating her, and he's kind of upfront to her about the fact that he was in prison, but he said that he was just robbing because of the poverty situation that he has found himself in. He was literally doing it for survival. He sort of, well, at least according to the police records, stayed dormant for that year when he got married and when Cecilia was pregnant with his daughter. But as soon as she gave birth to the daughter, so around 1997, he tries to rape another woman at Leatherhead Station. And here probably the best CCTV footage that you will ever see come out of any crime scene in the 90s will be shown on Crime Watch. Crime Watch was this TV show, I'm pretty sure it is cancelled now, that was shown every week, like where they would kind of go through like weekly analysis of the crimes, and usually they would show any pieces of evidence such as police sketches or CCTV footage in an attempt to get the public to phone the number and actually solve the crimes. So Tony is at home literally seeing his own face on Crime Watch and he just goes to Cecilia and says, "Hey, we're moving to Spain." No explanation, he just ups and leaves and moves his whole family to Spain. Which honestly, it isn't hard to deduce why Cecilia was suspicious of this guy from the get-go. Like, just imagine one day, you're like, hey, out of no reason whatsoever, let's pack up all of our lives and just leave. Just up and leave. You're like literally holding a toddler in your arms. You're like, yeah, this smells of crime. This smells of like somebody who is unrational and fucking unhinged. To take the piss even further, the police actually tracked him in Malaga. They found him 6 months after this, and they offered him the option to voluntarily give himself up. But he declines, so the Spanish government is informed, but they somehow, for some reason, label him as low risk and they believe that no extradition was needed. Tony is now left in peace to just continue committing the same crimes, just in a different country where people don't have his DNA on the record and where nobody knows of, well, all of the crimes that he was committing except from the government that isn't really looking into him as well. So we pick up with Tony in year 2000. Just a few months after Rocio's disappearance and murder, Cecilia finally decided to take her daughter Sabrina and just leave. They stayed on good terms because of Sabrina, because of their daughter, but Cecilia just would never get rid of this feeling that something was off and that Tony was to some degree probably responsible. During the next 3 years, Tony started working at the British pub called Chicken Shack, and this is where he met a fellow worker, Simon Bowers. Shortly after, Simon will move to Alaurín el Grande, which is technically just under Coín, so like literally where Sonia lived. And this is where he started off his own bar and he invited Tony to work with him as a cook. And Tony took his offer, he started working as both cook and a waiter at this place. And shortly after this move, what do you know? Sonia disappeared. So here we actually have somebody who matches the timeline. So this isn't just speculations any longer, but somebody actually lived in one place when Rocio disappeared and then moved right where Coín is, where Sonia disappeared from. After Cecilia called the civil guard, they finally went to Tony's to arrest him, and this is when they took his blood sample that they finally managed to match to both crime scenes. Finally, you would think, okay, Maja, so he's in prison, right? The DNA matches him. Like, why are you not telling us that Lolly has been released onto the streets? She has been compensated, she's living her best life right now because she's clearly not the guilty party here. Well, they waited their precious time because they still tried to see if there was ever a connection between Tony and her. And those kind of news, once they started circulating in the media, well, they got to Tony because Tony knew that she has been imprisoned and that the police doesn't want to look all muggy, that they don't want to look mugged off. So he knew he should use that, the fact that she was actually convicted in Rosillo's case, and then he will get maybe less time. So he played it for the police. So as he's being held in prison before his trial, Rosillo's mom Alicia opens the door to her house to find a plastic bag, and this bag contained Rosillo's bloody underwear and cigarette butts with the DNA of Dolores Vazquez Lolly. We, to this day, don't know who arranged for this delivery, who took this from evidence, because all of these were supposedly in police evidence and that they were just mashed up, but this didn't prove anything. This didn't help Tony's case because how would it help his case? He just thought that he is going to sort of like point people in a different direction, then he's going to point people to think like, oh no, it was actually Lolly that committed this crime. But no, it just looked staged as hell. And then during this press conference, he's trying to act super serious and trying to again deflect and move all of the blame for Rosillo's murder to Lolly. And this is his statement. Just one observation on this note of the evidence being shipped to Alicia, Rosillo's mom. Of course, none of it helped feed her delusion and belief that her ex-lover was actually responsible because, you know, why would the DNA be like present in the evidence? Would that mean that they actually had that in the evidence from the get-go? You know, are they going to release this woman? She did give a couple of interviews stating that she still believes they were both in on it. Like, she doesn't discard Tony King because obviously the evidence is there, but she said that she still believes Lolly was behind it even after all of that. And I mean, I can't help but like not blame her. Just think about yourself in this kind of situation. Like, somebody is already charged for the murder, they're telling you that there is a motive and you have received threats from this person, so you believe it personally. You should be able to trust that the police will get the justice for the murder of your daughter, and they have already done so. Now they have just found a second culprit. Everybody was feeding her this information, and obviously once it goes to trial and then they manage to convince the jury and the jury charges somebody as guilty, it's really hard for the parents of the victims to kind of get that out of their head, because then that means nobody was responsible for the murder of your daughter for a few years. Back to Tony King and his trial. Here the witnesses went a bit beyond just bitching about somebody's character. There were plenty of evidence, but the ones that I'm going to highlight were this woman called Melita Priscilla, who worked at the car wash, and she testified that King appeared at the car wash, told her that he spilled a bottle of wine, and then not to open the trunk of the car, so like clean everything, but not to open the trunk, nor should she clean inside of the trunk. Then there was Cecilia King, whose testimony was strong because she described the night that Rocio disappeared, but she also described just living with him and why she suspected him from the get-go. Because this isn't like the usual thing that, you know, your husband just goes into a toilet and you kind of like start having suspicions. Like, it comes with time. So she described his character and why she suspected him in the first place. And then there was this psychologist who kind of gave a profile of Tony Kim just by assessing him a bit. They found Tony had antisocial personality, that he lacked feelings of empathy, of regret, and that he was capable of criminal acts in order to get his way. What really goes to prove this is the fact that he confessed. And not only did he confess, but he confessed in the letters to both families. To Rocio's family, he wrote that he was sick to his soul, that he is sick himself and he needs help. And to Sonia's mom, he said that he ran over Sonia while he was drunk, and then he didn't know what to do, that he is ashamed and he is asking for forgiveness. He didn't run over her, by the way. Nah, that was a lie. He stopped and then attacked her then and there outside of the car because autopsy can tell those things. Also, how did you think that this was logical, Tony? You ran over her and then what? You like punched her, used her as a punching bag for like 40 more punches, what, just to make sure that people buy that you ran her over. Mental, unhinged. In December 2006, the jury finally reached a verdict. And this I find to just take a piss, because for Rocio's murder, yes, he got charged for murder, but then they exonerated him from the accusation of the sexual assault because they couldn't prove it, right? But that was the whole basis on which they put Lolly into prison, if you remember. So I just find that a bit fucking bizarre, but okay, cool. He got charged for both murders. He got 36 years for Sonia's murder, and then 19 years and some restitution money to pay up for Rocio's murder. From the articles that I found in the last couple of years, he was never extradited. He's still serving his time in prison, and even on like the best of appeals, he would only be out in the year 2033, which is still soon, like a lot sooner than you would have thought it would be. Also, I saw in some reports that in 2007 he lost his daughter in drowning incident when she was only 10, while he was already in prison. There are no winners in this story, but you know who really didn't have even an ounce of a win? And she definitely should have? Lolly. She was released after serving 519 days, if I remember right. So right after he was apprehended and they couldn't make the connection between the two. But Rocio's mom still believes that she was partially involved. The public never cleared her name. The police never bothered to clear her name. Only Lolly literally gave any press conference to anybody that would listen to try to clear her name, and also sue the government of Spain to get some money, to get some compensation for the time spent in prison, if for nothing else, if for, you know, not being found guilty by the whole country and never exonerated. But still, to this day, she was never compensated. And she still, to this day, is the first person that pops into people's minds when they think about this case. And there is one thing that she said that really stuck with me. I covered here a long time ago, like different mic, different camera, completely different setting. Like if you're here from the beginning, you know what I'm gonna be talking about. I think it was October last year. It was that episode of Criminal UK with Kit Harington, where he was falsely accused of rape. And I went off tangent and just researched and did like a rabbit hole deep dive onto what people do once they're falsely accused to clear their name, what can they do online, on internet, like how should they communicate with the media, like all of those things. And truly it just never gets 100% better, but there are some things that can be done. But something that is sort of like PTSD to some degree, and that like people on the forums when I researched this said that triggered something in me when I heard what Lolly said, is the fact that she notes down like the names and the places that she goes. So let's say she is to go to a bar, she will note down where she is, what time she's there, and just like keep track of everything, because now she never knows if the police is going to bring her up in some fuck knows what case, bring her up as a suspect, and she again will be just falsely accused. That just resonated with me differently, because nobody deserves to have that kind of PTSD, to have served in prison for nothing while being completely innocent and then never getting any compensation out of it, while she will never have her 519 days back. Driving back to the main point of this video, and that is truly the dangers of the police having pressure on them and knowing and recognizing that point and not caving under that pressure, under media pressure, under police pressure, because the dangers of having somebody falsely accused are really just not even twofold, they're like quadruple-fold in this freaking case. Had Tony been caught and kept in prison for the amount of time that he should have served, he would have never came to Spain, and Rocio and Sonia would have still been alive today. Had the police in Spain actually followed the evidence and not imprisoned the wrong person, Sonia would have never died. And the most fucked up of it all, had Sonia never died, Lolly would have never been exonerated. Like, just for a second, imagine if he didn't follow his pattern, if Sonia didn't fight, if the DNA was not under her fingernails, and also if he didn't smoke the cigarette and leave it on the scene. Nobody would have been able to connect him to the second crime scene, and again Lolly would have probably served 15 years in prison for a crime she did not commit. Just like that, I shouldn't be here telling you about this case, and both Rocio Wanninkhof and Sonia-Carabantes should still be alive today. Well, I thought I would get it out of my system, but now I'm fuming even more because I spoke about this case. So, you have seen a different side of me today. Very sick and very pissed off. Just fucking pissed. So, what are your thoughts on this case? Tell me in the comments. There's literally no humor. I don't even know if there's gonna be any outtakes. If there is, I'm gonna put them there. This case is just, you can't play with human life like this. I'm sorry, but you just can't. If you give somebody a sentence, there needs to be some solid ass reason for you to reduce it. If somebody's a violent offender, slamming somebody's jaws on the sidewalk and just literally slapping women left, right and center, and you give him 5 years in prison, really? You think like he's gonna come out of prison and like what, love and caress women? Please, get the fuck out of here. Like, and I like to tell you that the justice system has progressed, and today the police will be like, well, we have no suspect, but we also won't put somebody wrong in prison and destroy their whole life, but will they? No, they won't. As like I'm telling you, in any single case, whenever you hear the police had no suspect or like they didn't have anything to show for it, trust me, some fuckery is about to happen. They're about to put just anybody behind bars. Like, fuck me, man. It's just like, why can you end this on a more positive note? No, there's no winners in this fucking case. And I'm done with shooting for the day because my voice is gone again. Come on, you can find you can find positive thing in everything, Maja, come on. Well, Spain still exists. This isn't Hunger Games, what the fuck? Well, also, yeah, if you can, something that will help your soul and mind. If you've liked Hunger Games, go back to it, watch it again, read the books again. Won't help your psyche, but hey, at least you won't have a reality check for quite a while. Spain still exists, you know, you can still go on holidays in Spain. I heard they are putting it on a green list here in the UK. Malaga, great. South of Spain, amazing. Costa del Sol, please, be safe. Spain still exists. This is how you're running, sweetie. Okay, listen. I'll be seeing you next week. And for now, Spain still exists, guys. Bye. I hate this one. I hate this slang. There's no height to here, okay? It's slang. English, not the first language. I'm an immigrant. Forgive me for everything, I guess. Okay, so is this better? No, because your whole fucking head. How are you gonna make the thumbnails when like the top of your head is not even in the shot? So yeah, first world problems, my thumbnails. I think your voice is more of a problem in this freaking video. Oh god, the cough, the flare, hello. Ooh, chokehold, shove it, Scorpio, vibes off. You know what my favorite thing of the videos is? It's like when you can see people walk by. It's just me editing it and I'm like, someone is walking on the street. Or like that car has been parked up there for quite some time. Things that I wouldn't have observed. Imagine if I catch a stalker while recording these videos. Yeah, imagine. What are you gonna do with that information? It's not like you can fucking zoom in enough on like a license plate, Maja. You didn't think this through, did you? What are you gonna do with this information? The fuck is that called? Washing machine for the cars. What is the washing machine for the cars called? Come on, you can do it. Car wash. Wow. Shortened it. Car wash. So why did you just do like as if you were a fucking genius? I did not, like, I just put chunks like from text in Spanish. Like, listen, my script writing is something else. This is why we are here for hours, Maja. They know. They know. Okay, let's move it. Let's move this along slowly. We're getting there. Before you collapse. Do you have a fever? Like, are you okay? I'm gonna die today. Please don't drop on me. Imagine death recorded on camera. The lamest death ever. Okay, that went fucking morbid. 0 to 100 for no fucking reason. Okay. The way this man is like, mala. Like, devil. That's like the punto final, the final point, the full stop. Punto. Mala y punto. Like, when would you ever even finalize like a sentence in English, like making a point? Like, yeah, Tony King, bad. Also, there is one video of Tony King that they show in this Netflix documentary that made me laugh. I actually had to stop and pause and just laugh because English people cannot pronounce Spanish words for shit. Like, it's so painful to listen to. He is literally screaming so inocente and like...
Alguien habla con mi hija y eso no importa nada, ¿ok? No escuchaba nada aquí. Yo soy inocente. El criminal es fuerte.
The word in English is innocent. The word in Spanish is inocente. It's literally the same word. You just add one letter to it. And he just butchered the shit out of it. I was like, mate, how are we here? Like, you look so aggressive. Like, at least try not to look like you want to punch every single woman in the face. At least fucking try.